Shalom. So, we are doing Genesis 35 today. Okay. Then God said to Jacob, "Arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there, and make an altar there to God, who appeared to you when you fled from the face of Esav, your brother. Uh, then God said to Jacob, "Go up to Bethel and settle there, and build an altar there to God, who appeared to you when you were fleeing from your brother Esav." Chabad. And God said to Jacob, "Arise and go up to Bethel and abide there, and make there an altar to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esav." Vayomer Elohim El Yaakov, Kum Ale Beit El, Veshev Sham, Ve'aseh Sham Mizbeach La'el Hanir'eh Elecha, Beborchacha Mipnei Esav Achicha. So God said, and this is the Shem Elokut, El with an Aleph, Yaakov, Kum. So this is the command form of Kuf Vav Mem, which is to get up, to rise. Ale, which is the command form of rise. So Aliyah, right? To go up. Beit El is the place. Veshev, so this gets into the one to the 2 or 3 root debate. So they're saying Yud Shin Vav. Um, Honestly, I am becoming more and more on the 2 radical train, because it really seems to me that yeah, that's Shin Bet has a certain root, and that's what's going on here. So dwell, stay, even sit, maybe return. You know what I mean? Sham there. Va'aseh sham, and make there. Um, and la'asot is kind of a strange thing. I would have expected boneh, but it's aseh, make there. Mizbeach, la'el, to the God. And while I would almost be um, tempted not to even capitalize God there. Um, I mean, it's obviously talking about God, but it's it's not really referring to God. I hope you understand what I mean. It really is to the God. Like there's a pronoun there. You know what I mean? Hanir'eh. So that is the nifal, the passive of to see. Alecha with the aleph. Um, and a yud. Does alecha usually have a yud? I think it does. Alecha, alecha. Um, yeah, it does. Wanted to check. Beborchecha. So the root there is bet resh het, which means livroach, means to flee. Yeah. So when you fled, mipnei esav achicha, from the face. I'm not sure I would translate it as from the face. Um, it's in English. It kind of face kind of is is too direct. Um, Mipnei means from. Esav achicha. Esav, who is your brother. Verse 2. And Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, "Put away the foreign gods that are among you, purify yourselves, and change your garments." So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, Get rid of the foreign gods you have with you, and purify yourselves, and change your clothes. Thereupon Jacob said to his household and all those who were with him, remove the deities of the foreign nations which are in your midst, purify yourselves, and change your clothes. And Rashi, apparently from the Zohar, is saying that this is referring to the spoils from Shechem. Okay. Vayomer Yaakov el Beito ve'el kol asher imo hasiru et Elohei hanechar asher betochechem vehitaharu vehachlifu simlotechem. So Yaakov says, El with the aleph, Beito, his house, the El Kol Asher Imo, that is all that is with him. Kind of almost expected it to be Ito, but it's Imo. Im means with. Hasiru. So, Sur, Samech Vav Resh, means to turn. Hasir, right, is the hefil, it's the causative. So it's can include to get rid of, right? Yeah. So even like shaving your head can be called lahasir seorotav. Um, yeah, to take the hair away. Et Elohei, and notice I pronounce that because this is a profane use of Elohim. It's a construct with nechar, which means foreign, right? Out, out, outside, I guess. Uh, Properly unknown. Compare Arabic on formation. Compare log. Absolute. Yeah. I think it is related to the similar thing lahakir, right? To recognize. I think it is related. Seems to me that it would be. And as always, the article goes on um, the last term in the construct chain. Asher, so the pronoun kind of is substituting in for the present tense of the verb to be. Uh, Bet tochechem, that is among all y'all, and tochechem is written bechisaron. Uh, well, hasiru is also, I would say, almost strangely that bechisaron. I would have expected a yud there. Vehitaharu. So they're saying hitpael. Let's see. So the root is tahar, which is purify. So I mean tet hey resh. And they're saying it's the command form of hitpael. So I'm not sure if I should be using this option. Assimilate the binyan's tough if the initial radical is tough, dalid, or tet, which is what is going on here. So let's try it both without and with. Let's see what it looks like in the imperative. So here it's hititahar. Hititahar. So let's see what it does to use this here. And in the Yeah, so hitaher. Yeah. So that's what's going on. There should be a dagesh in the tet, and there is a dagesh in the tet, right? So, um, yeah. So the tough of the hitpael is getting integrated in there, which I guess makes sense. Okay. Um, the hachlifu. So this is the hefil, the causing of het lamet pei. Um, halaf, right? So Khalipin is one of the ways of doing exchanges. So Hachlifu, change. Simlotechem. So a simla is a garment. So simlotechem, your garments. Um, and you can use your concordance there. Also, slightly would have expected maybe a vav there. Simla, I guess, doesn't usually have a yud. Simlot. Okay, next verse. Then let us arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make an altar there to God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and has been with me in the way which I have gone. Um, then come, let us go up to Bethel, where I will build an altar to God, who answered me in the day of my distress, and who has been with me wherever I have gone. And we will arise and go up to Bethel, and I will make an altar to the God who answered me on the day of my distress, and was with me on the way that I went. Venakuma vena'ale Beit El ve'ese sham mizbeach la'el ha'one oti beyom tzarati ve'yehi imadi baderech asher halachti. Okay, so venakuma, we will get up, right? So it's the first person co- common plural venakuma. Vena'ale, and the hey at the end is what's making it cohortive. Um, so they're saying na'ale is the conjunctive imperfect. So yeah, hmm. Venakuma vena'ale. Yeah. So the vav is not flipping it. It's it's more saying let us, as in a together. Okay. Um, Beit El to Beit El. Ve'ese, and I will make, um, again with the conjunctive, I guess. Sham, there, Mizbeach, La'el, to the God, and this is same as the previous one. Ha'oneh, the one who answers, it's in the participle or the present tense, and it's written Bechisaron. La'anot, Ain Nun Hey is to answer. Oti, Oti is the direct object marker. Et would be with me. Um, Beyom Tsarati, and there is no article there, right? So, um, I'm not sure. I mean, sometimes in English there kind of has to be the article there, but this isn't a definite day, right? And I think the rest of the pasuk, the rest of the verse, kind of goes along with that. Tsarati. So tsar um, can and does mean um, distress or pain. It comes from, well, Sorar is an enemy, but Sur means to form, and Sar means the opposite of wide is like straits, right? Like narrowness, and the that imagery is used a lot in the Hebrew. Um, the narrowness as opposed to the wideness. Wideness being good, narrow being bad, and that goes back to Mitzrayim, right? And you can see, I a while back I did a thing on Egypt, an introduction on Egypt on uh, one of my one of my what should we call it videos. Vayehi, excuse me, I have a little bit of a cough. Vayehi imadi, and has been, yeah, um, was, will be, yeah. The vavs are, they're kind of subjunctive here. Honestly, I listened to a podcast on the consecutive or conjunctive, however you wanted to say it. The vav at the beginning of either a perfect or imperfect, and they made a very convincing argument that it's kind of, it's not just either flipping or not. It's telling you that there's a kind of mood change in the context. Imadi, with me, bad derech, in the way. There is the article there in the asher halachti, in which I have gone, I went. Holech, to walk or to go. Verse 4. So they gave Jacob all the foreign gods, idols, which were in their hands, and the earrings which were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the terebinth tree, which was by Shechem. So they gave Jacob all the foreign gods that they had, and the rings in their ears, and Jacob buried them under the oak at Shechem. Uh, and they gave Jacob all the deities of the nations that were in their possession, and the earrings that were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the terebinth that was near Shechem. Vayitnu el Yaakov et kol Elohei hanechar asher beyadam ve'et hanezamim asher beoznehem vayitmon otam Yaakov tachat ha'ela asher im Shechem. So vayitnu, so latet, to give. Right? So they gave El with the Aleph, Yaakov, et kol Elohei hanechar. So all the foreign gods, and it's very similar to the previous verses. So I would translate it very similarly. Asher bayadam, that were in their hands. The pronoun is kind of being a substitute for the verb to be. Ve'et hanezamim, and I'm kind of wondering why the earrings. Rashi doesn't really seem to say. I guess the earrings were somehow involved with idolatry? Not sure. I kind of want to see what the Mefarshim say. We're on Genesis 35 4. So, Genesis 35 4. Let's see. לא ידעתי מה עניין הנזמים דווקא. So I'm not sure who this Birkat Asher. I'm not sure what this. What this text is. Birkat Asher was a very recent thing apparently. So he says, I don't know why they're why it's specifically talking about the earrings. So yeah. Yeah, sure. I don't know who this Birkat why it has so many of this guy. Dat Zekenim. No, no. Hanezamim. Hakatava Katala Targam Yonatan ben Uziel. Well, it's not really Yonatan ben Uziel, so Kachaya Dahavibod Nahen. It's Karta Deshchan Dahavitzair Behan Damut. So the so okay, first of all, the Targum Yonatan on the Torah isn't actually Targum Yonatan. It's something that was called the Targum Yerushalmi, and it got confused. והוא תוספת הדברים על לשון המקרא ויותר נראה כמו שכתוב something שהוא שב על אלוהי הנכר, כלומר הנזרים אשר באוזניהם של אלוהי הנכר. Oh, that it was the earrings of the idols? הנזרים תמיד מוכנים לתכשי אלילים. Because people used their ears like okay. Let's see what else anybody says. באוזניהם פירוש באוזניהם של הצלמים. So this is what חומת ענן anach al Torah. Another one I don't know. באוזניהם Chizkuni says the same thing. Okay, that's at least somebody I recognize. Khatam Sofer. He doesn't seem to be talking about it. הנזמים כדרך הנזופים להוריד תכשים כמו שמות. So he's saying earrings were commonly used, and this is Contras Hiba Yetera. I don't know who that is. Marina Bachaya. No, no. Yeah, so I guess the Rishonim don't really talk about it, but the Acharonim seem to be saying that they were used readily for Bechor Shor Be'oznei Elokei Hanachar. Yeah, don't know what to tell you. That's what they said. Okay, next. Well, oh, Vayitmon, right? And Tet Mem Nun is to hide, conceal, cover. Um, in rabbinic Hebrew, it's actually hatmana is actually used quite a bit regarding the halachas of Shabbat. So if for Shabbat, if how much you can be how much you can leave food in something that keeps it hot. So that's called hatmana. Um, ויטמון, no vav, it's written בחיסרון, אותם, them, Yaakov, tachat ha'ela, beneath the Ella. And I'm not sure how many times Ella is used. 13 times. Elm, oak, tail tree. Feminine of Ayil, an oak or other strong tree. Terebinth derives from El, compare lack of clear distinction. Elon, Alon, Ele, Ella. A deciduous tree with pinnate leaves and red berries, occasional in Palestine, grows to great age, always of single tree near Shechem. So I guess there was a particular tree near Shechem. Okay. Asher im Shechem, that was literally with Shechem, and that's what all the Mefarshim talk about. They're like, it's near Shechem. I guess the outside of Shechem. Okay, next verse. Let's see how long this. This is a very short chapter, so I'm going to take my time. Okay, and they journeyed, and the terror of God was upon the cities that were all around them, and they did not pursue the sons of Jacob. Then they set out, and the terror of God fell on the towns all around them, so that no one pursued them. Then they traveled, and the fear of God was upon the cities that were around them, so that they did not pursue Jacob's sons. Vayisau, v'hi chitat Elohim al ha'arim asher sevivotehem, velo radfu acharei bnei Yaakov. Okay, so and was chitat. So this is an interesting word. From chatat, to be shattered or dismayed. 51 times, actually. Yeah, and people familiar with Chabad will recognize the word chitat Elohim because it's used for Chumash Tehillim and Tanya. Okay, so the terror, dismay of God al ha'arim. So that's what the ayin. The cities, right? Ha'arim, the cities. Asher sevivotehem. So sovev means around. Seviva means also around. It's the adverb. Yeah, it's written with a yod without a vav. Sevivotehem. That were around them. Velo radfu. So rodef means to pursue, to want to kill, really. A rodef. Although also we say things like rodef shalom, right? Is somebody who pursues peace. So someone who seeks something. Radfu. Acharei bnei Yaakov. After the sons of Jacob. Verse 6. So Jacob came to Luz, that is Bethel, which is in the land of Canaan, he and all the people who were with him. The display of my stream is off. You're zoomed in and can't be seen. Hey, Dominic, how you doing? Let me see. Beth, what about Exodus 32:3? And all the people stripped themselves of the golden earrings that were on their ears and brought them to Aaron. Right. So that's actually, Beth, one of the things that the Mefarshim did say. So yeah, good catch. Although, yeah, I mean the Mefarshim said, the commentators said that um, somebody's having problems. Oh, okay. Let me see if I can fix this. Yeah. Okay. Um, just a second. Oh, that's what's going on. Sorry. Okay. Okay. This should be better. Hopefully, this is better. Okay. Just double check. Uh, okay. So hopefully, I'll have to recheck it some other time. Okay. So this should be good. Hopefully. Sorry about that. Okay. Oh, okay. Cool. Okay. Um, cool. Okay. Where were we? We were on verse uh 5. Did we finish? We finished 5. We're on 6. Okay, so Jacob came to Luz, that is Bethel, which is in the land of Canaan. Excuse me. Need some water. Which is in the land of Canaan, he and all the people who were with him. Jacob and all the people with him came to Luz, that is Bethel, in the land of Canaan. And Jacob came to Luz, which is in this land of Canaan, that is Bethel, he and all the people who were with him. Vayavo, excuse me, Yaakov Luza, Asher Be'eretz Canaan, he, Beit El, who, V'chol Ha'am Asher Imo. Um, okay. So Vayavo came Yaakov Luza. So the hey at the end, they always get this wrong in the morphology. That is the directional hey at the end of it. So towards Luz. Um, Asher Be'eretz Canaan, that is in the land of Canaan. Um, yeah. Well, again, there's no article in. Well, there also wouldn't be an article because it's in a construct with Canaan. He, and you'll notice it is spelled Hey Vav Aleph, which is how all the third person singular, almost all third person singular pronouns are spelled in the Torah. You have to look at the vocalizations to see if it's he or who. Beitel, who, that is, and the pronoun is being used as the verb to be, the present tense of the verb to be. Um, V'chol ha'am asher imo, and all the people who were with him. Yep. 7. And he built an altar there and called the place El Bethel, God of the house of God, because there God appeared to him when he fled from the face of his brother. There he built an altar and he called the place El Bethel, means God of Bethel, because it was there that God revealed himself to him when he was fleeing from his brother. Okay. He built there an altar and he called the place El Bethel, for there God had been revealed to him when he fled from before his brother Esav. Vayiven Sham Mizbeach Vayikra Lamakom El Beit El, Ki Sham Niglu Elav Ha-Elokim Beborcho Mipnei Achiv. So Vayiven, so the root is Bet Nun Hey, to build. Sham, there. Mizbeach, um, and that is so for the people who are practicing their reading, um, that is a patach gezula underneath the chet there. It's written mizbecha, but the patach, if there is a guttural at the end of a word, the patach actually moves before the guttural, and instead of mizbecha, it becomes mizbeach. And that comes from the word zevach, which is to slaughter or to sacrifice. Vayikra, and he called Lamakom, that place, right? There is the article in the vocalization. El Beitel, right? The God of Beitel. Ki Sham, because there, Niglu, so and this is the nifal of Gimel Lamed Hey, I believe it is. Yeah, Gimel Lamed Hey, to uncover, to reveal. They're saying, well, I guess, yeah, Galut is as in exile, is also related. Niglu, so it's the passive nifal. That was revealed is more than appeared. Elav, with the aleph, ha Elokim, right? The the again, um, while it is ultimately referring to God, the verbiage is really more general, right? Think, I mean, yeah, be borcho, and that is a kamatz katan, by the way. So in his fleeing, mipnei achiv, from his brother. Echav would be his brothers. Achiv is his brother, singular. Okay. 8. Now Deborah, Rebecca's nurse, died, and she was buried below Bethel under the terebinth tree. So the name of it was called Alon Bahut, terebinth of weeping. Now Deborah, or Deborah, or however you want to say it, Rebecca's nurse, died and was buried under the oak outside Bethel. So it was named Alon Bahut, means oak of weeping. And the Deborah, Rebecca's nurse, died, and she was buried beneath Bethel, beneath the plain. So he named it Alon Bahut. Vatamat Devorah Meineket Rivka, ותיקבר מתחת לבית אל, תחת האלון, ויקרא אלון בחוץ. So, and died, right? This is mem vav taf, Devorah, written without a vav. Meineket, so this comes from the word yenek, uh, which means to nurse, as in a baby nursing from a teat, right? So meineket is really a wet nurse, um, and it comes from the participle of the causative, right? The one who gave to drink, really. Rivka. So she was Rivka's wet nurse, I would say. Vatikaver. So this is the nifal, the passive of um to be buried. Kuf bet resh. Mitachat lebeit el, from below, but from below Beit El. Tachat ha'alon, underneath the oak alone, right? Written b'milui. Veikra Shemo, and the name was called Alon Bachut, right? And boche is the root to weep, to cry, right? So, and then there is a petucha, there's an open break there in the scroll. Verse 9. Then God appeared to Jacob again when he came from Padan Aram and blessed him. After Jacob returned to Padan Aram, that is northwest Mesopotamia, also in verse 26, God appeared to him again and blessed him. And God appeared again to Jacob when he came from Padan Aram, and he blessed him. Vayera Elohim el Yaakov od bevo'o mi Padan Aram, vayvarech oto. So Vayera is the nifal, it's the passive of to see. Resh Aleph Hey. Elohim, right? El Yaakov, to Jacob, right? Preposition with the Aleph. Od, again. Bevo'o, in his coming. Yeah. Mi Padan Aram, from Padan Aram. The other places said, from Padan Aram. Yeah. Okay. Vayivarech Oto, and he blessed him. Ito would be with him. Oto would be him, as in the direct object marker. Okay. Verse 10. And God said to him, your name is Jacob. Your name shall not be called Jacob anymore, but Israel shall be your name. So he called his name Israel. God said to him, your name is Jacob, means he grasps the heel, a Hebrew idiom for he deceives. And we had a little discussion about this. I don't actually think Yaakov is an idiom for deceiving. And we've had a discussion about this on the Discord and the Bridges of Meaning Discord. But he will no longer be called Jacob. Your name will be Israel. Means he struggles with God. So he named him Israel. God said to him, your name is Jacob. Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel shall be your name. And he named him Israel. Although, I mean, Rashi does say, Lashon Adam tavo b'ma'arav va'ikva. It comes with stealth and guile, they're translating it. Actually, they're saying the Zohar says that. I should actually look that up. I did not realize that. Okay. Vayomer lo Elokim, Shimcha Yaakov Yikare, lo Yikare, sorry, Shimcha od Yaakov, ki im Israel yihye shemecha, v'yikra et shemo Israel. So God said to him, right, Shimcha Yaakov lo Yikare, your name shall not be called Yaakov. Shimcha od, your name anymore, right? Yaakov. Oh, okay. So it says Shimcha Yaakov. Your name is Jacob. Right? Shimcha Yaakov. Lo Yikare Shimcha od Yaakov. Your name should no longer be called Yaakov. Ki'im, rather, is how I usually translate Ki'im. But if, but so. Um, um, Israel yihye shemecha. Israel should be your name. Veikra et shemo Israel. And he called his name Jacob. Israel. So the yikare is in the nifal, it's in the passive, and vaikra is in the kal, it's in the normal, we would say, the pal. Okay, next verse. Also, God said to him, I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall proceed from you, and Jacob shall come from your body, and kings shall come from your body. Okay. And God said to him, I am God Almighty. Hebrew Kel Shaddai. Be fruitful and increase in number. A nation and a community of nations will come from you, and kings will be among your descendants. And God said to him, I am the Almighty God. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a multitude of nations shall come into existence from you, and kings shall come forth from your loins. Rashi says Shaddai is related to Kedai, which is okay, I guess. Kedai levarech, able to bless. We can get into the names if people want. Okay. Vayomer lo Elokim, Ani Kel Shaddai, Pre Urve. Interesting. Okay. Goy ukahal goyim yihye mimeka umelachim michalatzecha yetzeu. Interesting. Okay. So God said to him, Ani Kel Shaddai. I am, yeah, God Almighty is how that's usually translated. So, yeah. So, pre urve is an interesting way of doing the imperative there. I mean, in Genesis it's purvu, but that's in the that's in the plural. Let's see. Pre urve. Hey, resh, hey. Talking in the Paul, and the command form is pray with the hey. Yeah, I guess I just never noticed that before. Pray or ve. Goy ukahal. So goy means nation. Ukahal goyim, and a gathering. Right? Kehila is a congregation, a gathering. Ukahal goyim. So a nation and a gathering of nations. Yihye mimeka will be from you. Um, umelachim, and kings, michalatzecha. So they're saying chalatz is loins. Um, huh. Chalutz is in the sense of strength, only in the dual, the loins. Hmm. Chalatzaim. Chalatzaim. Oh. Hmm. Yeah, chalutzim, to equip for war. In in modern Hebrew, chalutzim is how you refer to the infantry, I think. Um, okay, chalatzecha. So they're saying it's in the dual always. I guess chalatzayim. Okay, yetzeu shall come out. Yep. Okay. Verse 12. Nesharim, hey. Hi, my internet is slow and delayed, so I said audio only. Okay. Supplant. Maybe H6121 as deceitful, but I don't know. Yeah, we had a little discussion about Ekev and deception. I think it's a later interpretation. Um, it doesn't seem to me that the early commentators, the earliest I was able to find was Rashi, and they're saying it's from the Zohar, so I'm gonna have to look that up. But I got, I didn't, I'm not a big fan of the idea that it's deceitful because we have the verse that says Titen emet la Yaakov, right? That God gives truth to Jacob. And I guess that could be kind of like a little, opposition of deceit and truth. I didn't consider that before. Maybe. Um, you know, yeah. I'll have to think about it. The gang's all here. Nisharim, Dominic, Holly. Okay. Verse 12. The land which Abraham and Isaac I give to you and to your descendants after you I give this land. The land I gave to Abraham and Isaac I also give to you, and I will give this land to your descendants after you. And the land that I give to Abraham, did I skip it? No. Gave to Abraham and to Isaac. Hey, Catherine, we really do have the whole gang here. Um, how come this isn't showing? Where's Catherine? There she is. Okay, so where were we? Um, and the land that I gave to Abraham and to Isaac, I will give to you and to your seed after you. Will I give the land? Okay, Hebrew. Ve'et haaretz asher natati leAvraham uleYitzchak lecha etnena ulezaracha acharecha eten et haaretz. Okay, so and the land at haaretz, the land asher natati leAvraham, which I gave, right? It's the completed action. Um, to Abraham, u leYitzchak, and to Isaac, lecha et nena, I will give her, right? It. Ul zaracha, zaracha, and to your seed, zera is seed, acharecha, after you, eten et haaretz. So this is the imperfect, right? The incomplete action. I will give the land. 13. And please, if anybody has any questions or wants to look at anything, please let me know, because basically the only good I am here is that I'm live as opposed to all the other videos you could be looking at. Okay, 13. Then God went up, departed from him in the place where he talked with him. Then God went up from him at the place where he had talked with him. And God went up from him in the place where he had spoken with him. V'ya'al me'alav Elokim b'makom asher diber ito. So, Ayin Lamed Hey is to rise, to go up. Right? Me'alav, from upon him, preposition with the ayin. Elokim, ba'makom, in the place. There's the article in the vocalizations. Asher diber ito, where he spoke with him. Ito is with him as opposed to oto, to him. Okay. 14. So Jacob set up a pillar in the place where he talked with him, a pillar of stone, and he poured a drink offering on it, and he poured oil on it. Jacob set up a stone pillar at the place where God had talked with him, and he poured out a drink offering on it. He also poured oil on it. Now Jacob had erected a monument in the place where he had spoken with him, a stone monument, and he poured a libation upon it, and then he poured oil upon it. Okay? Vayatsev Yaakov matzeva b'makom asher diber ito, matzevet aven vayasech aleha nesech vayitzok aleha shaman. Okay, so you'll see the repetition, right, of this root yud tzaddik bet, nun tzaddik bet, sorry, is to stand. So a matzeva is a monument, right, or a sign, right. So when he set up, a monument, vayatsev matzeva, right? You see the doubling of the language there. So Yaakov memorialized a monument, maybe I would translate it, maybe erected a, what do you call that? Pillar, okay. Ba makom, in the place. Love the Rashi on this one. In the place where he had spoken with him, I do not know what this teaches us. Yeah. Rashi says, I'm not sure why it says this. Yeah, it's you kind of become, so Elie Wiesel has a book on Rashi. I would read the introduction. He's right. When you grow up, well, I didn't grow up with Rashi, but really, when you do grow up with Rashi, you do really get there. Yeah, it's interesting. Okay. Okay, where were we? Asher diber ito matzevet aven. Sorry. So that he spoke with him, right? Ito. Matzevet aven. So this is Evan turns into Aven based on the cantillation marks. The matzeva here is being put in a construct chain with Evan, right, with stone. So a stone monument. or a pillar of stone. Vayasech aleha nesech, and he poured upon it something that is poured, right? Obviously, it's talking about wine because that's what we're talking about when we say a nesech. But really, it just means to pour, um, cover, yeah, to pour out. So make a libation. Um, Vayitzok aleha shaman. So shaman turns to shaman again because of where it is. Shaman literally means fat, um, but since it says vayitzok, it's talking about olive oil. Um, yeah, to cast low. I guess this is no. Genesis 28 was the first time, and similarly, he was pouring oil on a matzeva there. Okay, so this really is like meshicha, right? The anointing. That's what he's doing. Okay, 15. And Jacob called the name of the place where God spoke with him Bethel. And Jacob called the place where God had talked with him Bethel. Bethel means house of God. And so Jacob named the place where God had spoken with him Bethel. Vaikra Yaakov et Shem Hamakom asher diber ito Sham Elokim Beit El. Uh, so Jacob called the name of Hamakom, the place, Asher Diberito, God spoke with him, Sham, there, Elohim, God, Beitel. Yep, pretty simple stuff. 16. Then they journeyed from Bethel, and when there was but a little distance to go to Ephrat, Rachel labored in childbirth, and she had hard labor. Then they moved on from Bethel. While they were still some distance from Ephrat, Rachel, or Rachel, began to give birth and had great difficulty. And they journeyed from Bethel, and there was still some distance to come to Ephrat. And Rachel gave birth, and her labor was difficult. Vayis'u mi Beit El, Vayehi od kivrat haaretz. Interesting. Lavo Ephrata, Vateled Rachel, ut vatkash belidta. Interesting way of saying this stuff. Okay, Vayis'u, right? So nun sin ayin is in modern Hebrew it's to drive, but they traveled, they went. Right? Mi Beitel, from Beitel. Veyehi od, and there was still kivrat haaretz. Now that's an interesting way of putting it. Kivra is a distance. Okay, it's used 3 times, always in the same way. Apparently distance only in the phrase kivrat aretz. The distance meant is uncertain, but from Second Kings, it would seem that it's been a short one. Assyrian Kivrati is a wide extended territory. Okay. And it's from Kvar. Huh. Already. Interesting. I didn't realize Kvar was so because we use Kvar a lot in modern Hebrew, it means already. I'm kind of surprised it's being so like okay. Kivrat haaretz. Okay. It is what it is. Um, so apparently Kivrat only shows up in a construct form with Eretz, with land. Lavo Ephrata, until they came. Lavo is written b'milui. Ephrata, again, the hey at the end is the directional one. So towards Ephrat. Vateled Rachel. And Rachel, right, yeah, Nisharim, yeah. It's Kvar means already. But apparently it comes from a distance. Didn't really realize that before. And Rachel gave birth. I'm not sure where they got travailed from. Teled just means gave birth. Vatakash. So kushi means difficulty. Kashe means hard. Yeah. So it was hard. It was difficult. Belideta, in her giving birth. Interesting way of putting it. Yeah. Belideta, in her giving birth. 17. Now it came to pass, when she was in hard labor, that the midwife said to her, "Do not fear; you will have this son also." And as she was having great difficulty in childbirth, the midwife said to her, "Don't despair, for you have another son." It came to pass when she had such difficulty giving birth that the midwife said to her, "Don't do not be afraid, for this one too is a son for you." Veyehi bahakshotah belidetah vetomer la hameyaledet al tir'i ki gam ze lach ben. I'm curious about the significance of the various places where Rachel labored. Um, so it's an interesting thing, especially because later in Nach it talks about Rachel's tears, where she is buried. So I know kabbalistically there are actually what's called tikkun chatzot. So when I was in yeshiva in Israel, um, sometimes, especially if I had a hard day, I would walk. It was walking distance from my yeshiva to uh, the Western Wall, and um, I would get there usually because it was after everything. I would usually get there around what's called chatzot. It's the mid. It's the halachic middle of the night, and that's when um, people would come for tikkun chatzot, which is a kabbalistic um, practice of getting up in the middle of the night to mourn the destruction of the temple. And there's two parts to it. There's tikkun Rachel and tikkun Leah. So the rectification of Rachel and the rectification of Leah. I would just sit there, and the people who were there would be sitting and on the ground and weeping and reciting Tikkun Rachel and Tikkun Leah. I would just sit there listening to them cry. It was yeah, it was moving. But that's for another day. But yeah, these difficulties and the places, kabbalistically there are all kinds of interpretations, which, not being a kabbalist, I don't know much about. Okay. Um, so uh, Veyehi bahakshota. So again, the root is kashe, difficult or hard, right? Um, sure thing. Um, like fear not, because even if she dies, the son will live. Maybe that is what the midwife is saying. maybe maybe the plain reading is really you're going to give birth to a son, and culturally at the time, giving birth to a son was considered a particularly great thing. Um, that's the plain cultural reading, I would say. Um, but so hakshot means it's the hefil, it's the causative, right? So really, it's when she caused difficulty, belideta, in her giving birth, right? Both of these are the infinitives, right? Her difficulty, her labor. Vatomer la, and said to her, ha meyaledet. So literally, it's the woman who causes to give birth, right? Meyaledet, obviously midwife. Al tir'i, so do not be afraid. From yirah is fear or awe, right? Ki gam ze lach ben, because this also is your son, is for you a son. Yeah, I guess, I mean, it is. She is kind of saying it seems like he's going to live, because if really, if it's if the child doesn't live in Semitic cultures, it wouldn't even be considered, like, you wouldn't even call it a son, really, right? A child that doesn't live isn't really considered what we call ben kaima, something that is going to last. Okay, next verse. And so it was, as her soul was departing, for she died, that she called his name Ben Oni, but his father called him Benjamin. Uh, so Benjamin, son of the right hand, Ben Oni, son of my sorrow. Okay, now I have to tell a story. Um, so my oldest nephew was always going to be called Benjamin, because there's a tradition of naming your firstborn son after your father, and my brother-in-law's father's name was Benjamin. So he was always going to be called Benjamin, and because he was the firstborn, my sister really wanted to do what's called Pidyon Haben, which is redemption of the firstborn. It's a ceremony that you can only do if your firstborn child is a boy. And my sister really wanted to do this. And unfortunately, it's only if it's a natural childbirth. If it's a cesarean um, childbirth, you can't do Pidyon Haben. My sister was in labor for 3 days trying to give birth to Ben. Um, and she um, finally, when he started to be born, she, when he started to be born, the umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck. So they had to do an emergency crash C section, which scared the bejesus out of my sister. And um, later, she didn't know about this verse. She didn't know that Benjamin means Ben Oni, the son of it, because she died in childbirth and all that. And so for her, um, it it really, I mean, uh, it became really meaningful to name him Benjamin. And then, so for the second child, she decided she was gonna schedule a C-section, and she went into labor. It was in the middle of the night. She goes to the hospital. They're like, okay, um, we'll do the C-section. And before they had time to do the C-section, she gave birth already naturally to Evan. Um, Yeah, you too, huh? That's funny, Nisharim. Yeah. Um, and then for the third kid, she's like, I'm not making any plans. Whatever happens, it happens. Uh, so, yeah. Okay. Enough story time. 18. As she breathed her last, for she was dying, she named her son Ben Oni, meaning the son of my trouble. But his father named him Benjamin, meaning son of my right hand. Okay. And it came to pass when her soul departed, for she died, that she named him Ben Oni, but his father called him Benjamin. Okay. Vayehi betzet nafsha ki meta, vetikra shemo Ben Oni, va'aviv kara lo Binyamin. So it was betzet, right? Leaving, right? Yetzia, right? To leave, to come out, right? Nafsha, her nefesh, her soul. Kimeta, because she died. Vetikrat Shemo, and she called his name Ben Oni, and this is with an aleph. I thought it was actually from Ayin, but guess not. Huh. This is aleph vav nun, which is much more um, apparently similar meaning, but uh, yeah, huh? I didn't. I always thought this was with an iron. Compare, yeah. Oh, okay. So they're saying okay, huh? Oni from iron. I never realized this. I always thought it was from ayin vav nun. I mean, uh, ayin nun hey, right? Like ta'anit to um to afflict, be afflicted. Um, yeah, son of my mourning. Maybe. Hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure. I never really considered that it was with an Aleph before, for some reason. Aviv kara lo Binyamin, and his father called him Binyamin, which obviously son of my right. Okay, verse 19. So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrat, that is Bethlehem. So Rachel died, or maybe even, yeah, avon as in iniquity. Yeah, that's what they were saying. Um, I think I actually like the derivation from ayin yud nun, ayin as in not, and therefore falseness. Um, yeah, it could even be her as in destruction. I think. Yeah, I don't usually do the names, but that is Bethlehem. 19. So Rachel died and was buried on the way to Ephrat, that is Bethlehem. So Rachel died and she was buried on the road to Ephrat, which is Bethlehem. Vatamot Rachel ותיקבר בדרך אפרתה היא בית לחם. Yeah, yeah. Probably will have to take a look at it later as well. Okay. So Tamot, she died, right? Rachel. Vetikaver, and she was buried, right? Nifal, it's the passive. Bederech Ephrata. So again, that hey at the end is the directional hey. So on the way to toward Ephrat, he, and so the pronoun is being used as the present tense of the verb to be. Beit Lachem. And it switches from lechem to lachem because it's at the end of the verse. Okay, next verse. 20. And Jacob set a pillar on her grave, which is the pillar of Rachel's grave to this day. Over her tomb, Jacob set up a pillar, and to this day, that pillar marks Rachel's tomb. And Jacob erected a monument on her grave, that is the tombstone of Rachel until this day. Vayatsev Yaakov matzeva al kevurata, he matzevet kevurat Rachel ad hayom. So again, this is just like we had before with the monument, right? Vayatsev matzeva, right? He stood up something that stands up. Right? Al kevurata, right? So upon her grave, right? Kevura means being buried. Kevurata, her being buried, her kevura, right? He matzevet kevurat Rachel. So that is, the pronoun is being again used as the verb to be, and this is one construct chain, matzevet, right, from matzeva, kevurat, from kevura, right, the burying, Rachel. So the monument of the burying of Rachel. Ad hayom, until the day, but means this day. And you can try going there now, but it's not the safest place in the world, unfortunately. Okay. Kever Rachel. Okay. 35:21. Then Israel journeyed and pitched his tent beyond the Tower of Eder. Israel moved on again and pitched his tent beyond Migdal Eder. Israel journeyed and he pitched his tent at some distance past the Tower of Eder. Vayisa Israel vayet ohalo mehal'a lemigdal Eder. Okay, so Vayisa again journeyed, right? Drove. Israel vayet. So nitya, right? Nitiat ohel is pitching a tent is a common thing, and we see it a lot in the Bible. Mehala. So this is Hebrew rhyming, right? So using the same letters and sounds over and over again. Hebrew poetry is made by alliteration, not really by rhyming. So that's what you're seeing here. Ohala mehala, because hala is not a very common thing. 16 times, more than I thought. Out there, onward, further, a primitive adverb. The reading here became early a subject of dispute, and manuscripts and editions vary accordingly. Some follow the school of Nehardia and read Hal Havaya. Oh, that's Deuteronomy 32:6. So there's a thing there. But that's different. Okay. Like, that doesn't make sense here. Syriac, Arabic, forward. Huh. Okay. Allah. Okay. Forward, onward. Interesting. Okay. So, from beyond, Lemigdal Eder. So, Gadal is the root to grow or big, and a migdal is a tower, right? Something that is tall or big. Does Rashi say Allah? Nope, there's no Rashi on here at all. Okay. Okay, next verse. And it happened when Israel dwelt in that land that Reuven went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard about it. While Israel was living in that region, Reuven went in and slept with his father's concubine Bilhah, and Israel heard of it. Jacob had 12 sons. Now the sons of Jacob were 12. That's a weird place to put a heading in the middle of a verse. Um, and it came to pass when Israel sojourned in that land that Reuben went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard of it, and so the sons of Jacob were 12. Okay, so tiny bit of explanation here is um, the generally the Jewish belief is that people of great stature are condemned for their actions way beyond what um, the literal in order to explain the gravity of even a minor infraction by someone of their stature, right? Uh, famously, David. The rabbinic interpretations, if you look in the Talmud, is um, very different from the literal, and we've talked about this many times before. I won't take it all up here, but we can talk about it again if people are interested. Um, so yeah, we don't actually believe that this was literally what happened, but that what he did was of such a stature that the Torah um, talks about it. That pet is rare. Which pet are you talking about, Nesher? Okay. Um, Vayehi bishkon Israel ba'aretz hahi vayelach Reuven vayishkov et Bilha Pilegesh Aviv vayishma Israel. Oh, wow. So there is a pet in the middle of the verse. Interesting. Vayihyu b'nei Yaakov shnemasar. Interesting. I don't think I've ever seen a pet in the middle of a verse before. And the cancellations, interesting. Yeah, yeah. So he is a punctuation we use. I'm actually interested in looking at the actual thing. Let me see if I can pull up Beverly Hills Chabad reading. So we're in Bereshit. Where are we? Vayetze or Vayishlach? Um, so this is 37. Machanayim. No, we're after this. Shemcha ki Israel. Where's the Petucha? Um, where were we? Okay, so we're so this is 35 verse 22. 34, 34, 35, 22, we said? ויסע ויית אכלה למגדל, ויהי בשכון ישראל ויהי וישכב את פלגש את אביו, ואת אשר בעיר, ואת אשר oh, hold on. Vayishma Israel, and there's an open break. So, no, I mean, yeah, I would say that it's different verses because here in the cantillations there's a sof pasuk at the end of Israel. So what we're looking at here is what's called a tikkun korim, which is um, what people who are preparing to read the scroll in the synagogue use. On the right side is the Masoretic text. So this is the Beverly Hills Chabad website. So they have both the Tikkun Korim and actually Rabbi Schusterman. So Rabbi Schusterman is the rabbi of Chabad of Beverly Hills. His father was the cantor at um, 770 for the Rebbe, and so they actually have here. I can play it.
Agim Gim Beis, Miseda Vayishlach, Tes Kislev, Milula Shadmur Hemsoi, Hei Shnas Ha'en Niflois, Parshas Vayishlach. Vayishlach Ya'ki Ha'idma Oshim
So it's
Lefonov,
from the
El
beginning of
Isov
Yishlach.
Achif, Arthur Seniors,
But so it actually has Rabbi Schusterman's father actually reading. So he's starting from the beginning of Vayishlach, and we're actually in where are we? Shishi. So we're towards the sixth Aliyah. Um, yeah. So the Tikkun Korim has a sof pasuk here. So you see the two dots. That's a sof pasuk. So that's where we end a verse. But I guess so. The numbering in the Hebrew comes from the numbering in the Hebrew usually comes. Yeah, they have the pay here as well. Usually comes from the printers. They counted the verses to error check each chapter, so it must be right this way. I thought it was the words. I'm not sure, but the Tikkun Korim here on the Chabad website, Chabad of Beverly Hills website, has a sof pasuk after Israel, and then there's the open break. Um, so verse numbers, obviously, there were no verse numbers in the Torah scrolls, um, and certainly not in the oldest manuscripts. Uh, and then the vocalizations came up with, I believe, around 1400 years ago, and the cantillations about 1,000 years ago. So, yeah, I mean, the consonantal text has had the same breaks for a very long time, and the breaks are in the consonantal text in most places. I believe the Dead Sea Scrolls actually show similar breaks. So I would I would say that that the verse should break there. That's my personal belief. And the Tikkun Korim, the way it's chanted, right? Since there's a sof pasuk there, it would be Vayishma Israel. Um, so the pasuk would end there, I believe. You can listen to Rabbi Schusterman chant it. I think there could have been verse numbers we have seen. I don't think Moshe's scroll had verse numbers. Pretty sure it didn't. I guess it's possible. Okay, let's go back. So, where were we? Okay, so Vayishma Israel. So, and then there's the Petucha there. Uh, Dominic, Moshe's scroll was written in KJV English, right? Yep. Okay, let's keep on. Vayihiu b'nei Yaakov shnei masar. Okay, so Vayihi bishkon Israel, right? So the root there is shin chaf nun, right? So mishkan, tabernacle, actually comes from that same root, shechina, right? Which is um, one way of referring to the Holy Spirit, right? Comes from that same root. Shachen, neighbor, comes from the same root. So bishkon, in their dwelling, okay. Israel, right? Ba'aretz, in the land. Hahi, that particular land. Vayelach Reuven, so Reuven went. Vayishkov et Bilha, and he lay with, and yes, that is a euphemism for relations. With Bilha, Pilegesh, so the concubine Aviv of his father, Vayishma Israel, and Israel heard. And then there's the break in the pasuk, in the scroll. Vayihyu, and were bnei Yaakov shnemasar, the sons of Yaakov, 12. Okay, next verse. 23. The sons of Leah were Reuven, Jacob's firstborn, and Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. The sons of Leah. Oh, hold on. Where were we? Yeah, the sons of Leah: Reuven, the firstborn of Jacob; Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar. I don't know how you say that in English. Uh, Issachar, I guess. Zebulon. Yeah, don't know. Okay. Um, the sons of Leah were Reuven and Jacob's firstborn, and Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. Bnei Leah, Bechor Yaakov, Reuven, Veshimon, Velevi, Vihuda, Veisachar, Uzvulun. So, Bnei Leah, the sons of Leah, right? Bechor Yaakov, the firstborn of Yaakov, and Bechor is written Bemilui. Reuven, Reuben, or however you want to say Reuven. Veshimon, and Simeon, Velevi, Vihuda, Veyisachar, and Yisachar is very rarely that second sin is actually pronounced. Usually, and sometimes you will see, like, there's a book that's famously called Bnei Yisachar, and the second sin is pronounced, but usually that's treated like it's silent, and it always has been. It's traditional. Uzvulun, right? Okay, verse 24. The sons of Rachel were Joseph and Benjamin. The sons of Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin. The sons of Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin. Bnei Rachel, Yosef, u Binyamin. And this is the example I always give of, um, just because a bet turns into a vet doesn't mean that it changed at all, right? Uvinyamin, his name is still Benjamin, but in Hebrew it's Vinyamin, not Binyamin, when it's Uvinyamin and Benjamin. Okay, verse 25. The sons of Bilhah, Rachel's maidservant, were Dan and Naphtali. The sons of Rachel's servant Bilhah, Dan and Naphtali. The sons of Bilhah, Rachel's maidservant, Dan and Naphtali. Uvnei Bilhah, Shifchat Rachel, Dan v'Naphtali. So, sons of Bilhah. So, Shifcha is actually the feminine form of slave. Is the second maybe a shin? So, there are times when we do pronounce it Yisachar, but usually it's just pronounced Yisachar. So it's I would say it's definitely a sin. I believe there are times in the Bible when it's actually even spelled with a samech. Don't quote me on that, but I believe there are. Um, you have to check for yourself. Um, anyway, shifcha is the feminine of slave, right? Rachel dan v'nafal. Right? So and here it's in construct form with Rachel. Okay, 26. And the sons of Zilpah, Leah's maidservant, were Gad and Asher. These were the sons of Jacob who were born to him in Padan Aram. The sons of Leah's servant, Zilpah, Gad and Asher. And these were the sons of Jacob who were born to him in Padan Aram. The sons of Zilpah, Leah's maidservant, Gad and Asher. These are Jacob's sons who were born to him in Padan Aram. Uvnei Zilpah, Shifchat Leah, Gad va'Asher, Ele bnei Yaakov, Asher yulad lo bePadan Aram. So, the sons of Zilpah, Shifchat, again, just like before, is maidservant, female slave, Gad ve'Asher. Ele, so the pronoun is being used as the verb to be, right? So these were Bnei Yaakov, the sons of Jacob, Asher Yulad, that were born, Yulad, lo, bePadan Aram, in Padan Aram. 27. Then Jacob came to his father Isaac at Mamre, or Kiryat Arba, town or city of Arba, meaning four, that is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had dwelt. Jacob came home to his father Isaac in Mamre, near Kiryat Arba, that is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac had stayed. And Jacob came to his father Isaac to Mamre, Kiryat Arba, which is Hebron, where Abraham and Isaac dwelled. Vayavo Yaakov el Yitzchak Aviv, Mamre, Kiryat Ha'arba, he, Hebron, Asher gar sham Avraham Yitzchak. So, Vayavo and came, right? Yaakov, El, preposition of the Aleph, sorry. Yitzchak, Aviv, Isaac, his father. Mamre. Okay. At Mamre. Yeah. Kiryat Ha'arba. So that's interesting. The hey. So in a construct chain, the article always goes on the last verb. So it's actually treating this like not a proper noun, but kind of like it's a construct chain. So Kriyat Arba is uh what do they usually call Kriyat Arba? Forget what Kirya was. What did they say? Kriyat Arba. Uh, so this is Rashi is saying the name of the city. Therefore, Mamre Kiryat Arba means the plain of Kiryat Arba. If you say that it should have been written Mamre Ha Kiryat Arba, the answer is that this is biblical style. In every case of a compound name, such as this, Kiryat Arba, right? So anytime there's a smichut, there's a construct chain, and such as Avi Ezer, Beit Lechem, Beit El, when a hey needs to be added, it is prefixed on this to the second word, to the last word, right? Kiryat is Albert, sir. I wish I had half of passion to talk about Hebrew for 1 hour. You haven't seen my you haven't seen my Genesis 1 video. It's 6 hours long. um, so First Samuel Beit Halachmi, right? Avi HaEzri in that's Judges. Yeah. Hiel the Bethelite, Beit Ha'eli in First Kings. So Rashi's got it. Kiryat is city. Yeah, I guess. Makes sense. Okay. He. So again, the pronouns being used as the verb to be. Chevron. Chevron is the name. Asher gar sham Avraham veYitzchak, where dwelt, sojourned, right? Lagur um, is a temporary dwelling, right? Abraham and Yitzchak. Okay, verse 28. Now the days of Isaac were 180 years. Isaac lived 180 years. The days of Isaac were 180 years. V'yihyu yemei Yitzchak me'at shana u'shmonim shana. Where was I? Okay, so and were Yemei Yitzchak, so it's construct of days and Yitzchak, right? The days of Isaac. Ma'at Shana, so Ma'a means 100, and it's being put in a construct chain with year, so 100 years. Ushmonim Shana, and 80 years. Okay, verse 29. So Isaac breathed his last and died, and was gathered, joined his ancestors to his people, being old and full of days, and his sons Esav and Jacob buried him. Then he breathed his last and died, and was gathered to his people, old and full of years, and his sons Esav and Jacob buried him. And Isaac expired and died, and was gathered into his peoples, old and sated with days, and his sons Esav and Jacob buried him. Vayigva Yitzchak vayamot vayasef el amav zaken usva yamim vayikbaru oto Esav v'Yaakov banav. So, Gevia, right, is to expire. Gimel Vav Ayin. I don't know how many times it's used. Quite a bit, 24 times. That's more. Yeah, compare Arabic, be empty or hungry. Yitzchak vayamot, and he died. So he expired and he died. Vayasef. So this is the nifal. It's the passive. So he was gathered. Aleph samech pei, to gather. El, preposition of the aleph. Amav, his peoples. Zaken usva yamim. So zaken literally means beard, but old, right? Usva, so sin bet ayin is to be filled, satiated. So, and full of or satiated yamim of days. It's in the construct form. Veyikbaru oto, and they buried, right? They kuf bet resh oto, him. Esav v'Yaakov banav. Esav and Yaakov, his sons. And there is another petucha, and we are at the end of our chapter. I am going to stick around for a while if people have any questions or want to discuss anything. Please feel free. Albert, welcome. You're new here. Nice to see you. And yeah, I await your questions or not. I have a few random questions. Shoot. Albert, is Hebrew a hieroglyph? Um, unless I'm completely understanding the word hieroglyph, not at all. So hieroglyph. Writing considered. Just make sure I know what word you're using. A stylized picture of an object representing a word, syllable, or sound. Yes and no. So, Paleo Hebrew did have. So, for example, an aleph looks like an ox's head, or bayit looks like a house, right? Gimel is supposed to look like a camel, kind of. So the thing is, it's actually an alphabet. So because it's an alphabet, each of the letters have a sound, and so I don't think it would be called a hieroglyph. Egyptian is apparently the classic example of hieroglyphs. There are people who really do try to figure out the meaning of the words with the shapes and the meanings of the original letters. You can get yourself into serious trouble that way. It People try to do that and it just doesn't work. What's the difference between Orthodox Judaism and conservative Judaism? Okay, so conservative Judaism broke off from Reform Judaism, and actually Orthodox Judaism as a denomination really also broke off from Reform Judaism. So, let's say around the year 1500 is during the time of the Arizal and the Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Joseph Cairo, and basically all of Rabbinic Judaism, Pharisaic Judaism, pretty much accepted the Shulchan Aruch, right, the Code of Jewish Law, and pretty much all major communities accepted it. It was based on things that were clearly accepted by everyone, like the Talmud, right? And so that wasn't very controversial at all. There were commentaries on the Code of Jewish Law, and those commentaries, I mean, we still have people who have commentaries and discussions of what exactly the Code of Jewish Law is, right? And what the halacha is in the same manner as, I mean, the type of learning of Jewish law. If you're leaving, bye, Catherine. If not, please hang around. So the what was I saying? I was saying, so Jewish law, the manner in which Jewish law was decided, all of Pharisaic rabbinic Judaism was is kind of unified in what is considered an okay manner to do that. What happened was, um, in the 18th century, 1700s, uh, and starting into the 1800s, there was what's called the Jewish Enlightenment or Haskalah, and secular scholars, um, especially people who went to college, started becoming rabbis or leaders of congregations, and they were people like Moses Mendelssohn is probably the most famous name, um, and as part of the Enlightenment, they rejected the binding nature of halacha, right, of Jewish law. In reaction to that, an Orthodox denomination in Germany was formed by most notably the Chatam Sofer and Rabbi Samson Raphael, Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. And so there became and he actually asked the government to create separate, um, to view them as separate religions. So there became a split specifically in Germany and that area between Orthodox and Reform, where Orthodox was no, we're keeping um, Judaism according to Jewish law, and Reform rejected Jewish law, right? They didn't feel that it was binding, and there are like their declarations and stuff, which I recommend reading. Anybody who believes in God is gonna quickly be rather unhappy with where Reform went. So, um, in the places where there was Reform, there ended up being a separate denomination called Orthodox. In the places where there wasn't Reform, Jews remained Jews and didn't realize there was this split and continued in communication with Orthodox Jews, right? So in Germany, there was Reform. That translated to the New World, to the United States as well, a little bit to um, France and England, but not so much. But it was mostly Germany and the United States that had Reform. Now, in the United States, Reform went too far and conservative, and there were rabbis who were part of the Reform movement uh, at what's called the Trafe Banquet. You might want to look it up, but it was the graduation of the first class of rabbis at Hebrew Union College. The organizers, the the meal had like shellfish and pork, and like it was very obviously not kosher. It wasn't just not really kosher, it was really, really not kosher. And so a group of the more conservative rabbis from Reform walked out, and they ended up starting their own denomination, which became known as conservative. And so Hebrew Union College is the seminary for Reform in the United States. Um, Jewish Theological Seminary, JTS, in New York, is the seminary for conservative, and they also have a campus actually in Los Angeles called the American Jewish University now. It used to be called University of Judaism. Most of Orthodoxy stayed with the old ways of ordaining rabbis, but Yeshiva University was formed by, and it's considered modern Orthodox. And but Orthodoxy is people who still agree that we are bound by the Shulchan Aruch and Halacha. Conservative themselves say that while we are not bound by halacha, we should be guided by halacha. And Reform, until very recently, completely rejected the idea of halacha. Um, and that's the main differences between them. I mean, I could go into even more detail, but I'm guessing I'm going to put you to sleep. But today, really, conservative and reform, even though they're very big in the United States, they are not officially recognized as Judaism in Israel. So conservative is like the middle ground, you could say. That's certainly how they portray themselves as. Most of Orthodoxy would say not. Mostly because Orthodox Judaism is diverse enough that there's kind of a middle ground within Orthodox Judaism. So there's what's called the Haredi, which are the ultra Orthodox. That's a pejorative term that's used a lot. Um, they're usually they call themselves Haredi, right? Which literally means fearful of God, right? Hared means to be afraid. Um, so there's the Haredi, which tend to be pretty, more hardcore, I guess you would call it. Um, Orthodox, and there's all the way modern Orthodox is actually what Rabbi Yosef identifies as, and they they tend to be more lenient on things and kind of take up the middle ground. Conservatives certainly tried to be the middle ground, but it's it's kind of lost its place, really. A lot of people have gone into either modern Orthodox, sometimes it's called conservadox, right? And that's really more what you would call a middle ground than really conservative itself. Conservative, since they started ordaining female rabbis and recently doing gay marriages, they they've really lost, you know. And then within modern Orthodoxy, there has been some move into uh, what call themselves open Orthodox, which have started also trying to ordain women and perform gay marriages, and that was very quickly there was a reaction to it. Okay, so basically the reform messed everything up. I would say so. Yes. Um, and honestly, the the thing that counteracted reform more than anything was Hasidism, because in the areas where Hasidism existed, all of these things like reform and modern Orthodox and that type of stuff never really gained much traction because there was what I would say a kosher way of dealing with it. Um, Hasidism is a populist movement. It's a revivalist movement. It's a spiritual reawakening, and it was strong enough to bat off the Haskalah, the Jewish Enlightenment, and reform. So that's what I would say. You had more random questions you wanted to ask me? My pleasure. Please ask, 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 ask. No, thank you. Menachem Mendel of Rimanov. Sounds familiar. Menachem Mendel of Rimanov. Mendele Rimanover was a famous Hasidic rabbi and the first with Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak of Lublin. Abraham Joshua. So he was 1815. Purim. He was a student of the Maggid of Mezrich, which so the main student of the Baal Shem Tov was the Maggid of Mezrich, and apparently Rabbi Menachem Mendel Rimanever was a student of the Maggid, which speaks well for him. Reb Shmelke of Nikolsburg, Yosef Meir Teomim. His primary mentor was the Rebbe Reb Melech. So, Rabbi Elimelech of Lezhinsk, the Rebbe Reb Melech, was one of the primary teachers of after the Maggid died, and most of Polish Hasidim trace their Hasidus back to the Rebbe Reb Melech. So apparently, he was a student of the Rebbe Reb Melech. Galicia, right. He was Av Beit Din in Fristik. Reb Zusha of Anipoli was the Rebbe Reb Melech's brother. Yeah, so apparently he was part of the what's called the Chevra Kadisha, Chavraya Kadisha, the the um, the students of the Maggid after many Hasidic dynasties have their roots in Rebbe Menachem Mendel's court. Yeah, so was not familiar with him or his writings, but apparently uh, a lot of Hasidic dynasties trace their Hasidus back through him. Okay. Uh, I read about him briefly in a book. He has interesting views about Sinai. I was just wondering if you knew of him. I haven't read anything of him, but from what I am reading, um, he would probably be described as um, pretty standard Hasidic fare. So, um, if I would be very very surprised if the views about Sinai were not very popular, um, because apparently a lot of the Hasidim. I mean, he was very involved in the beginning of Hasidic Judaism. So yeah. Next random question, please. Is there a certain structure to prayer we should have, like recitation of scripture, venting to God, etc.? So, um, well, I think you've probably heard my views on what Jesus was saying when he said, "This is how you should pray," right? Father in heaven, right? I think he was actually referring to the Amidah. Um, and apparently, early Christian practice, right, was to recite Our Father 3 times a day, just like the Amidah. Um, I I mean, you can certainly try to use a Jewish Siddur, even though you're not Jewish. There have been attempts at printing Sidurim for. There's one famous one. I think it's called Brit Shalom, or it's the companion of it, which um, was created so somebody who's not Jewish can pray out of it. Um, I I'm always a fan of Psalms. You can't go wrong with Psalms. Um, your There is the advice that even though it's important and good to have the liturgy and to repeat the liturgy and have repetitive rites, they have their place. At the same time, um, your prayer should also separately or in conjunction include actually talking to God, right? As God, as your God, your personal God, right? Not you know, not the way everybody else relates to God, but how you individually relate to God. So I would say a combination of psalms and praises and worship of God. Um, the Amidah. Uh, you cannot go wrong with reciting Shema, right? With Ahavta, right? And love the Lord your God, right? Um, and actual individual personal prayer. So, I mean, what are you're not required, um, not being Jewish, you're not required. Well, I think Gentiles are still, it is still considered part of the covenant of Noah to pray to God. I don't believe there's a set requirement. I'd say probably it's a good idea to pray at least a little bit every day. Um, and yeah, you can't go wrong with Psalms. You can't go wrong with Shema. I think the Amidah, or even just parts of the Amidah, um, seems like a good idea. And take some time for personal one-on-one time between you and God. So that's what I would say. I would recommend also talking to Rabbi Yosef. He's a good guy. He's a smart guy. I disagree with him a lot, but he's a very smart guy who has a lot of learning under his belt, and he's got a head on his shoulders. Follow up questions, more questions, random questions. My pleasure. I'm actually glad this worked out because I moved to Thursdays, so it seems it's a better time for people. Good night. Next time, be well, sleep tight. God bless. I'm glad to hear it, Nishari. Uh, I am very glad to hear that because ultimately, it's about empowering you to learn for yourself, to connect for yourself with the word for yourself as directly as possible um, with God, because that's what we do here. Try to correct, try to connect um, as directly as we are capable of, and empower each other. It's really important to empower yourself and empower others. I'm gonna hang around for another 10 minutes or so, unless there are questions. Huh? I'm surprised Twitch is being so. You might try seeing if you could stream YouTube, and if there's a streaming platform that works. I use Streamlabs. I'm willing to try streaming to other things. If there's a sound only streaming service, I wonder if I could stream to. Wouldn't say it's your fault. Yeah, try YouTube. If that doesn't work, I'll see. I might be able to find if there's a sound only streaming service. Apparently, there are no audio only streaming service. Okay, if nobody has any questions, I'm gonna go in 2 minutes. Okay, I am going to go. Good night, shalom. Oh, I forgot. Most important part. Safania 3:9. Ki az epoch el amim safar berura likro chulam l'shem havaya lo avdoshchem echad. For then I will restore to the peoples pure language, that they may all call on the name of Havaya